I'm Emily Mashak, and you are listening to Tuned Into NoCo, Town Square Media show that lets you know what matters in NoCo. Today, I'm talking with John Kincade of the Thompson Valley Rotary and Kim Akeley-Charron, the Executive Director for the Thompson Education Foundation, and Lindsey Bittner Graham, a local artist, about the 29th Annual Governor's Art Show and Sale. So thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Emily. Glad to be here.
Of course. Now, before we get into the event itself, I want to talk a little bit about each of you. How did you all get to be involved with the art show? Can you tell me a little bit more about your roles this year?
Okay, I'm John Kincade. I got started in with this art show actually 29 years ago when I was president of the Greeley Rotary Club and invited to come to the first show that happened 29 years ago. And then I've been familiar with the show ever since. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was asked to jury the show and did that several years. And then after that, after I became a member of the Thompson Valley Rotary Show, I took on as being a committee member in charge of events. My regular life is I'm the executive director of the National Sculptors Guild, which means I place public art all over the country.
How about you, Kim?
Sure. Well, I've lived in Loveland now for a couple of decades and have been familiar with the show. You know, as a community member, been very familiar with the Governor's Art Show for that time. As in my role here at the Education Foundation, we have worked closely with a variety of service groups in town, but particularly Loveland Rotary and Thompson Valley Rotary Club, around a lot of the programs that we offer to students in Thompson School District. And this is one of them. And so through the Education Foundation, what that means for folks who aren't familiar with what an education foundation does, we're the nonprofit entity that supports our local school district. So our mission is the students and staff of Thompson School District. And through that, it's everything from curriculum support, field trip support, all the way to working with our unhoused youth and helping folks that are facing that situation to make sure that their kids can at least be in school every day, removing the barriers to have those kids be in school.
And how about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be part of this. I'm one of many, many wonderful artists that are being, exhibited during the show, and I'm just very flattered to be part of this. I've been a fine artist I'm located in Denver, and I've been a fine artist for probably 10 years now as a full-time fine artist, but I was a fashion illustrator for a good 20 years prior to that, and then that market kind of went away. And so I transitioned into fine art, and I've always visited the Governor's Art Show. It's always been, a yearly event for me to go to it. And, now I've been involved in as a participating artist for, I think this is my 5th time. I'm not sure, I'd have to look, but I think it's around my 5th time. And it's just a beautiful venue. There's amazing artists, and I'm just very flattered to be among the included family of artists that are in the show. Colorado has some amazing talent, and if you go see the show, and I hope you do, you'll see that artists this year in particular have just produced absolutely fabulous, over-the-top artwork. So I've seen pictures of it online, and when I went and dropped off my paintings the other day, and I was one of the last ones to do it, so a lot of the paintings were already there. I was just blown away. I mean, it's just a beautiful show, and artists have put their best work forward for this. So I'm just real excited about it, that it's going forward, and it's opening at the museum this weekend.
That is so great. Well, we're glad to have you here, especially to hear your perspective as someone in the show. I know the show will be a little different this year because of COVID-19. What can people expect in terms of pandemic regulations? Can they show up in person, online? How does that all work?
Yes, we've made a number of changes And I first of all have to compliment the Loveland Museums who have been over it backwards to help us make this show a success and even make the show happen. We're one of the few shows that are going to take place in Colorado this year. And the Loveland Museum has helped us do that. One of our missions is to support Colorado's artist community. And we were just really hell-bent to get this show to happen. The museum is following all of the guidelines set forth by the Larimer Health Department. And that means that they'll only allow up to 50 people in the building at a time. We'd like people to go online by going to Loveland Museum and then go ahead and reserve a ticket. And that way you'll be assured that there's a time for you to be there and to get in and see the show. From what I understand in talking to people, there's a lot of interest in this show, and there will be a lot of people showing up our first day on this coming Saturday. But the show is open all the way through October 31st, and so there'll be many, many opportunities for people to attend. Once you get there, masks are required, and there'll be people there to help you. There's also hand sanitizer for you, and we just ask people to, as a courtesy, to show social distancing, and that way everybody will be able to see the show and enjoy the show. And we anticipate really quite a crowd over this next month.
So great that we can still all be safe but enjoy all of the local art that Colorado has to offer. And speaking of that, Lindsay, I know you talked earlier about how amazing some of the art you've already seen is, but can you tell me a little more about your own art? What pieces are you going to have in the show?
Yeah, so I've got 4 total pieces. I think that's the maximum that each painter was allowed to contribute. I've got 2 large paintings, and I believe the large paintings are on one floor and the smaller ones are on another one. And so I've got 2 small paintings as well. And so everything is framed beautifully. Mine tends to be, I do a lot of horses. I do a lot of Western themed work, more impressionistic style. So very loose and impressionistic. I've got some draft horses. I've got one with a scene with a cowboy and a horse. I do all my own photography shoots. So I actually, sometimes hire models and go out on location to ranches and to get my reference material. A lot of my reference material from this show came from one of my big pieces is 2 Belgian horses. My husband and I went out to Granby and visited a sombrero ranch out there and went on a sleigh ride, and I did a big photo shoot with them. And my husband's also a photographer, so he always helps me with these photo shoots. And then I do lots of sketching, and the painting came together for that one. I'm just really excited about that one being in this show. I went out to Troyer's auction. I go there a lot to see the draft horses that are up for auction. And one little painting called Aging Gracefully is 2 silver Percherons. And that's a really favorite painting of mine. Another one is a herd of horses running that I actually went up and visited the reenactment of the Battle of Little Bighorn. And I visited the reservation up there and did a lot of photography and sketching with their horses up there to put together that composition. So, that's how I work mainly. That's where my work is focused. But, and I think a lot of people, and the nice thing about this show, it's not a themed show. So everybody just puts forth their best work, what they do. And most of it that I saw is representational. So there's a lot of variety. There's not one particular style that's, being exhibited. There's beautiful sculptural work as well. So, but for me, those are my 4 paintings. So go over there and see them, because I'm really proud of what I have in the show. Several of them were done new just for this show. And so, they're all oil. Mine are done in oil. I do a lot of sketching beforehand. I grew up with horses. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and riding actually English show horses. And so when my family moved here, I was in high school. I quickly became in love with the Western way of life, and I started visiting, all the art shows out here, and actually went to CSU and majored in art, and then actually went into fashion illustration at that point. But I always painted on the side. I always come back to horses, which are my love, but I love the whole Western way of life, and particularly today's, how it's adapted, to today's Western, way of life. My granddaughter is actually a champion barrel racer, and I'm so proud of her. So I go photograph her events a lot of the time. So basically that's kind of what I'm about. But I'm just represented in the show, and I'd love for you to go see the work. But there's fabulous work represented from so many different artists that I have looked up to for years, that are my mentors. So these are nationally known, represented artists, that happen to live in Colorado. So it's just a fabulous show. I can't even overstate it.
Those pieces sound so beautiful, and I know that I and our listeners cannot wait to see them in person. And I love that a show like this has a place for local artists like you to showcase your talent for the public. And while it's a great place for local artists, I also know that the proceeds from the art show also go towards multiple good causes. And John, I know one of those causes is that it will benefit the Rotary-sponsored charitable projects that a lot of our Rotary clubs are doing. Would you be able to tell me more about this and where those funds are going to?
Sure. The Rotary clubs are really active, especially with youth. And so a majority of the funds will probably go to youth-related projects based upon need in the Northern Colorado area. We highlight, however, and we call our show Art with a Heart, and we really focus on the Thompson Foundation's program to help homeless families of children in the school district. So a third of the proceeds actually go to help those kids and their families in our school district. And I think our participation in that program has made a huge difference in that program. And I think Kim can probably tell you a little bit more about that than I can. But the money is distributed throughout the year as we see needs, and heaven only knows there's lots of need this year in a lot of different areas.
I love that it's going to such a great cause with that. And along with great causes, I also wanted to ask you, Kim, about the Thompson Education Foundation's Homeless Assistance Fund. I know some of the proceeds are going towards that. Can you tell me more about this organization and what that does?
Sure, absolutely. So through the works that we do to support Thompson School District, we support a variety of different programs, activities, and scholarships. And one of those is our McKinney-Vento Youth. And McKinney-Vento is a federal act that identifies what it means to be a homeless student or an unhoused student in the public education system. And it doesn't necessarily, I think a lot of times when people think of someone who is unhoused, they picture them sitting on a street corner. That's not necessarily what that means at all in regard to youth. It just means that they have they're an unstable or inadequate housing situation, and maybe they are living doubled up with a family, or maybe they are living in grandma's house for a week, and then the next week they move to another community, but they still want to stay in their same schools, to stay at an uncle's house. And, they don't have a fixed address. And so that creates challenges for students that are, trying to focus on schoolwork, of course. And so what we try to do through this fund is remove barriers that might exist for those students to be successful in the classroom. And it's a program that we've had in place for a long time, but we've really grown it and grown what we can provide to our students over the last 8 years. And then a huge part of that has come from the Rotary clubs. And then as they started to understand more about what it was that we were doing with this fund, they started, the transition to having the art show support the fund with 1/3 of all the proceeds. And that's that's an unprecedented and huge opportunity for us here to be able to support these families. In Thompson School District, we have between 15 and 16,000 students. And last year, pre-COVID, just through normal work, midway through March, we were over 800 of our students being identified as McKinney-Vento or unhoused youth. And of course, we know that the COVID pandemic has affected people that may have been on the cusp of something like that, and that number is likely to be higher by the time we get through the end of this school year. So the need is real, the need is great. One other area in particular that we focus on in that subset of McKinney-Vento kids are a group of kids that are identified as being unaccompanied, and that means that they are, and in this particular case, kids that are in high school that no longer live for whatever variety of reasons with a parent or guardian, and they are trying to get their college education, because we know that kids are, their high school education, college too, we're working on that, but their high school education, we know that kids who don't graduate from high school are over 300 times more likely to be unhoused in their adult life. And so we want to make sure they get that high school degree. And in a great variety of cases, we're able to support those kids to move on and transition them into some sort of a post-secondary education. The funds that we receive from Thompson Valley Rotary and Loveland Rotary through the Governor's Art Show have taken us to another whole level. We're no longer just giving out, gift cards to support groceries and gas. We're able to provide mini grants to our unaccompanied youth if they have a major activity that their choice is to keep working double shifts at their job or go to school, and we want them in school. We can help get them over that hump, whatever that is. We provide scholarships for students. We provide for the unaccompanied youth, scholarships to post-secondary education, I should say. And then for the unaccompanied youth that are graduating, we make sure that they have a good graduation experience, provide them Visa gift cards to be able to purchase something to wear to graduation, and to, maybe for their dorm room if they're moving on to a 4-year degree. And so again, just trying to remove barriers. One other thing that we have done, and again, I don't think that if we hadn't had the participation of the Rotary clubs, we wouldn't have had the strength and the empowerment to do something that happened just this year in 2020. So Thompson Education Foundation and Loveland Housing Authority worked together with legislators and senators starting with senators and then representatives from Colorado and here in Northern Colorado, to pass SB 2106, which removed some barriers for unaccompanied youth who would get turned away if they were going in for services because they weren't 18 yet and they couldn't sign for themselves. And so we were able to work with the legislature to make that adjustment. And now that's a state law that's going to help students everywhere in Colorado, not just here in Northern Colorado.
What else would all of you like listeners to know about either the show or your respective organizations? Just what else do you want to get out there?
Well, as a teaser, I'd like people to get on the web and look up the Colorado Governor's Art Show, where all of the work that is in the show is presently on our website. And because of COVID, for the first time, you'll actually be able to purchase the artwork over the web. Now, when purchasing a beautiful piece of artwork, I think it's always best to see it in person. But if that just isn't possible, we welcome everybody to get on the website, and you can actually peruse through the show and see every single piece that is represented in the show. that's something we've never even explored selling through the web before, but we were ready to do it. I think we have a simplified way of doing it. And if there are any questions, just please do not hesitate to call and have us help you.
Yeah, I mean, what's pictured on the web is great because everybody is everybody's work is shown there, but what you don't see is the framing. And so, you know, if you're thinking of purchasing a piece that you see online, you can always ask to see a photo of it framed or inquire about, you know, the presentation of it in that way. Because when we were submitting photos, that's what they wanted. Is it's hard to always photograph a piece framed because the focus, then something is blurry. Either the image is blurry or the frame is blurry because it's three-dimensional. But that's one thing you don't see, which you would see. You know, everything is beautifully presented and well lit in the museum. So I do urge people, if they can at all possible, go see it, you know, in the museum, just because what I saw when I dropped my paintings off and what I've seen in years past that you don't see online is maybe the textures, the depth to paintings. Like mine are kind of thick and thin in some areas, where some areas of paint are thicker in layers. That is not always well presented in a photograph. Photographs tend to flatten everything out. It's just the nature of the camera. So, and you don't see the size relation. You know, you see it what it is, but you can't really get a grasp of the size until you really see it, you know, in person, whether it's small, and some of the smaller ones are just as well, you know, executed as the larger ones. So, you know, it's the variety of sizes and shapes and textures that you see when you actually visit the museum. And I believe you get that emotional connection, you know. And also artists are going to be there for meet and greets throughout the show. And I don't know the whole schedule of everyone's, what the museum has in store, but I know that I'm going to be there the afternoon of October 17th to meet and greet visitors to the museum. And so I just think that's great that they're encouraging us to do that, because that's what we miss, you know, in having the big opening, is being able to actually talk to the visitors and the people coming there about our work. So I don't know if they're going to have that listed, but I imagine at the museum, if there is an artist you're in particular fond of and you want to know if they're going to be there, I imagine they would know that if you call.
That schedule is going to be on the Colorado Governor's Art Show website. So people will be able to check that website and see when artists are going to be there. It'll be every Saturday afternoon for, I believe, 5 Saturdays.
I would just like to say how grateful we are here at Thompson Education Foundation to have the support of our community, the support of Loveland Rotary Club, Thompson Valley Rotary Club, and the artists who come together to do this and do it somewhat in support for our unhoused youth. If folks want to learn more about Thompson Education Foundation, the work that we do for the school district and this particular program, you can find us at thompsontef.org.
Well, thank you all so much. There's clearly so many different moving parts going into an amazing show for an amazing cause. So I appreciate you all taking the time to enlighten me on those today, and I cannot wait to see the show.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Again, that was John Kincade, Kim Akeley-Charron, and Lindsay Bittner Graham talking about the Governor's Art Show. To learn more, visit governorsartshow.org.